So before we get into the actual material, we're going to begin again with a little meditation, because this meditation we've been doing last weekend and on Wednesday is very similar to the Mahamudra meditation. And we will introduce that because we're trying to observe the conventional nature of the mind. There are various conventional natures of the mind, but we say the clear light, the conventional clear light nature of the mind. Sometimes clear light nature of the mind refers to the emptiness of the mind, especially when you're talking about the subtlemost mind. You might have heard that clear light, you might think, oh, that's referring to emptiness. But here, the nature, conventional nature of our mind. Remember from our last course when we talked about conventional nature and ultimate nature are one entity but different conceptually. They're never separated. You can't have a conventional nature without an empty nature forming one parcel, so to speak, one medallion, one coin, two sides. So the conventional nature, the conventional clear light nature of the mind is what we're trying to observe by letting go of the thoughts, seeing the space between the thoughts, recognizing that even where the thoughts are pulsing there, images or emotions or worries, for them to be present, there has to be some spaciousness, some clarity within which they're arising. That's called the clear light, conventional clear light nature of the mind. So let's begin. Sit comfortably. Let me take a sip before I start. A little liquid here. Okay. So sit comfortably, with your spine erect, spine straight up and down. Bring your attention inward, like imagining the action of a tortoise or turtle withdrawing his or her head and limbs, pulling in the head and the forelimbs. Withdraw your attention from the five senses to your heart chakra area. And in a very comfortable state, just pay attention to the mental consciousness. You can go back and scan the other ones. It's not the eye consciousness, like pull in that one, like maybe the head. It's not the ear consciousness, maybe the right leg, not the nose consciousness, left leg, or left front leg. Not the tongue consciousness, the rear right leg pulling in. Not the tactile consciousness, rear left leg. They don't have to be that order, just as an analogy. And with one corner of the mind, watch the rest of the mind and what it's doing. If you're quite observant, you may actually notice there is some volition in the rest of the mind. I want to think about this, I have to finish that thought. Or there may be a succession of images or thoughts that arise. Very crucial observation to make is that if you don't follow one of those thoughts, any of those thoughts, let's say some particular thought that might be tempting to elaborate on, they lose their vitality, they disappear. And you're left with a little quieter spaciousness of the mind. From the start, see if you can sort of focus on that spaciousness of the mind within which the thoughts are arising. If you find yourself wavering toward the body consciousness, the mere presence of your body, sort of like withdraw your attention away from that, like the turtle tortoise pulling in its limbs, just to that central place in the depth of your heart chakra. If you get fixated on some thought or observation, say one of your senses, maybe you hear the buzzing of some fluorescent light, or you hear the cars outside, or you might smell some incense or something. Of course, withdraw your attention away from those senses, but also recognize that your mental consciousness, the way that the mental consciousness observes them, is within the mental consciousness, within the spaciousness of that mind, and the fact that the image or thought or emotion or observation is present to your mind indicates that there's some spaciousness there. So defocus on the objective thought, so to speak, the objective observation, and refocus on the spaciousness of the mind to which that is appearing, to which it is embedded, so to speak, and within which it's arising. We try to let go a little bit of the body consciousness as we imagine withdrawing the senses, like the 5 limbs of a tortoise, turtle, whatever. So there might still be the sense, prominent sense of your self as the observer, the I, some autonomous, inherently existing entity who's sort of overseeing what the mind is knowing. I think logically, there doesn't have to be some other observer. The mind itself is observing. That sense, that appearance of a self even though it may not be appearing in the same way as other thoughts at first, if you enlarge your sphere of the consciousness, recognizing it, the consciousness is observing, knowing that sense of self, focus on the consciousness to which that self-identity is appearing, within which it's embedded, and let go of the objective, the object, the self. That self never existed in the past, will never exist in the future, doesn't exist now. The appearance of it has been a constant phenomena wherever, whatever realm we were born in. Sense of self. But the big problem is the mind's believing it, adhering to that, grasping to that as true. So if you can let go of the object, temporarily you can let go of the grasping. The seed of the grasping is still there. And like the meaning of Daka or Dakini, the Tibetans translated that into Tibetan as Khandro, Khandroma, male and female. Ka means space, Dro means go or traveler. He or she who travels to the space of non-conceptual wisdom. Just dive into your mind without a sense of worry of the I. You may oscillate into some depth and then feel you're distracted to the body and the grosser things again. Recognize that the image that we're getting, we're trying to develop of this nature of the mind, as yet it's just a mental image, just an imagination of it that we're developing through some analysis like this, watching, actual observation of the mind and thoughts and so forth. The approximation that we have of that clear light nature right now is not how it actually exists. We're getting closer and closer to that. Let go of that, recognizing that too is a thought within the actual clear light nature of your mind. Let go of that and see if you can get to something more subtle. Unobstructing. Thoughts can come and go. Knowing, having the faculty of awareness, knowing that which appears to it, unlike a crystal, say, that's in a sense clear, but not unobstructing the way this is. Crystal may be unobstructing to light to a certain degree, a piece of glass. If the body arises to your mind, if some pain sticks its head up, let that go and just see the spaciousness, this clear light nature of the mind within which it's arising. don't let your mind simply sink into a dull state. Once you've got a little insight, then you sort of let go of your attention, the intensity of your mindfulness sort of becoming dark, and don't be satisfied with that at all. See if you can keep the vibrant appearance of the clear light nature of the mind. That is your object of concentration, of your samadhi, of your shamatha. Most of us probably have not yet developed shamatha. To do so, to develop tranquil abiding, qualified samadhi, concentration, you need to have an object. So here we're taking the clear light nature of the mind, trying to prolong our observation of it without being distracted. Very, very subtle mind. And just for a moment, pay attention to your respiration. I myself notice that your breathing is very calm because we're looking at a very subtle object, slower than usual, even slower and more uniform than when we're just watching the breath, which is a relatively gross object. I think my chance, my opportunity to look at this clear light mind, to identify it, is something incredibly rare. Just to see this, to see the potential of the mind. His Holiness calls this conventional clear light nature of the mind the conventional Buddha nature. Generally, Buddha nature means the emptiness of the mind, but this is just the conventional counterpart of that. It's clear light nature. What an incredible opportunity to see that I can change. Never from the beginningless time of all the activities I've created, perhaps the negative actions I've created, there was never an I, the way that my mind thought that when I did those actions, negative actions. There was never an I that was existing from its own side. All of them arose from this clear light nature of the mind. So think, I'm going to try to take advantage of this opportunity now that I have, whatever years I have left, or hours in some cases. Maybe some of us will not live out the night, or this year, or this decade. Whatever time I have left, I'm going to devote to trying to develop the spiritual path within my continuum, especially what we call the two bodhicittas. Conventional bodhicitta, aiming for enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, and ultimate bodhicitta, the wisdom of emptiness within a mind that's held by conventional bodhicitta. For that purpose, I'm going to, at this very moment, listen and pay attention and practice this evening on the words of the teachings in the Gelugpa tradition on the Mahamudra. I'm going to listen to the teachings, participate, think, contemplate, meditate. My main aim is to achieve enlightenment because I have some sense of compassion and duty to repay the kindness of all mother sentient beings. And that's the best way that I can do that. Okay, so bring your attention back to the present. Just a short meditation. I did notice that, all of you, all four of you, breathing was much quieter than other times. Did you notice? Did you have a sense of that?
Mm-hmm.
Don't you believe? Venerable? No, you didn't. I want to say venerable Jeff, but I don't know. Vulnerable. I sometimes joke with some of my friends, instead of writing venerable, I said, you're vulnerable. How did you notice your mind was a little bit quiet and the breathing was regular?
Yes, it was quiet.
Okay. Mike?
I noticed that after you pointed it out, it said watch your breath. And
Mhm.
it's like, yeah. As
Yeah.
soon as I started watching it.
Yeah, they got
right,
yeah, it's that, yeah. Right. Like a watchmaker, watch repairman or repairwoman, you have to concentrate so carefully that their monocle or their magnifying glasses on, looking there to work on the gears. And so in concentrating in that way, you let go of your attention to the other senses. In this case, it's to watch, the technician is using their tactile and their visual sense mainly. Concentrating, the breathing calms down. So this topic, the Mahamudra, as I had mentioned before, just etymologically, Maha means great, like we talked about Mahayana or Maharaja and so forth, Mahasattva. Mudra, sometimes in Tantra we talk about various, making various hand gestures or something that we call mudra. But mudra has a few different meanings. Here, the main meaning of mudra is like a guarantee, like a seal, like a government seal that you stamp your document with. So the Mahamudra is actually referring to emptiness, the ultimate nature of phenomena, which verifies or seals, authenticates that phenomena actually exists. If it didn't have emptiness as its sealing factor, as its conjoined entity, it would just be an imagination, like the horns of a rabbit or the sense of a truly existent eye. It would something that would appear to the mind. That appearance has some conventional existence, but what we think that it means would not exist at all. Right? The term Mahamudra doesn't seem to have existed in any of the Buddha's, Shakyamuni Buddha's teachings in the the sutras certainly, or even in the Buddhist tantras. It seemed to be coined by some of the Mahasiddhas. You know who the Mahasiddhas were? Do you know those things? You know that? Maha again means Siddha means realized. So should I say Mahasiddhi? Mahasiddha. What's the difference between a Siddha and a Siddhi?
Isn't in the city when you have some for meditation, you have some ability of clairvoyance?
Mm-hmm.
Would that be considered a city?
Maybe a Siddha is a person who has siddhis. Okay? So has realization. So great realized ones, the Mahasiddhas. There were some various groups in ancient India. Sometimes they talk about the 84 Mahasiddhas. Do we have any representations in the, sometimes they have tankas, especially in tantric monasteries, they'll have tankas of telling the stories of the 84 Mahasiddhas. So these beings, men and women, who had really entered into the Buddhist path, and they were really devoted their life to this. They had already developed renunciation, of course. They'd had they had developed a certain degree of compassion and bodhicitta, maybe not be spontaneous bodhicitta yet, and had an understanding of emptiness. But what was the very special reason for calling this practice that we're going to be talking about the Mahamudra was that it was a practice to bring about realization of emptiness quickly. Generally, in the text it mentions that there are two ways of approaching emptiness, to realizing emptiness. First, to learn about it intellectually, to have the logical reasons that prove that the self doesn't inherently exist and phenomena do not inherently exist. Many different reasonings, clarifying many doubts in the mind over a long period of time, reading the great treatises on emptiness and the commentaries. Mahamudra Rinpoche has mentioned that without studying those great treatises, very difficult to get the right understanding of emptiness. I'm talking about the teachings of Nagarjuna, his main disciple, Aryadeva, and the others that clarified that, Buddhapalita, Chandrakirti, Shantideva especially, and others. So first, developing an understanding of emptiness, maybe like in the monastic tradition, studying all these texts for many years, and then going into retreat and using your understanding of emptiness as the object, that you develop intellectually, to try to develop single-pointed concentration on that. Most of the Western students, I think, sometimes a little bit frustrated. I think that's why people were somewhat enamored a few years ago, last decade or so, when different teachers gave their teachings on emptiness, Western teachers sometimes, that seemed so, now I can understand emptiness. They thought they never understood before. My teacher Lama Yeshe, whose book we'll be using, Mahamudra, How to Discover Our Own True Nature, Lama Yeshe was a great, first of all, when he was young, great scholar. In the monastery, he was known to be a great debater and, very assiduous scholar. But then he left before getting the Geshe degree, the culmination of that. And with the guidance of his teacher, Khabje Trijang Rinpoche, his guru, he went and did various retreats. I think from talking to Lama, one of the most, critical or juncture, that brought about his own understanding was his meditation on Mahamudra. So that means using this method to have an experience of emptiness, not first by understanding it intellectually, but first having a meditative experience, even though it may not be fully qualified emptiness at first. They have some experience, and that can give you the taste. When you have some kind of experience of something, then you have the courage and excitement to continue practicing that. Sometimes when the intellectual teachings seem so complicated, so many doubts arise and unclarity. So the Mahamudra mainly talks about the experience first. So I'll read a sentence here if I can find it easily here. in the commentary. This is the root text that was written. Here it says by the first Panchen Lama, Losang Chogi Gyaltsen. I didn't catch that. That was my Apple Watch. Did I
You
say
have to say it again. It didn't
Losang
finish.
Chogi Gyaltsen? Something triggered it. Usually you have to say, "Hey Siri." That was funny. That sometimes does that. You know?
It's cracking me up.
So this says it was written by the first Panchen Lama. Actually, this is the first Losang Chogi Gyaltsen, who also wrote the Lama Chopa Puja that we do. You know, the Guru Puja. Great scholar. After Lama Tsongkhapa, 4 generations afterwards, actually, Losang Chogi Gyaltsen was the first one who was given the name Panchen Lama, but he is technically the 4th Panchen Lama because they gave the name subsequently after he was given the name Panchen Lama. They gave the name 3rd Panchen Lama to his previous reincarnation, 2nd Panchen Lama to the Lama before that, and 1st Panchen Lama to the one before that who lived in the time of Lama Tsongkhapa, the Lama Tsongkhapa disciple. So it's really not the 1st Panchen Lama. I mean, it's the first one that was given that name by, I think, Mongolians, Khan of some kind. But at any rate, this text is called the root text, and it's not very long. You can almost memorize it. It's like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 pages, something like that in English. So I will be reading more of it later and going back to the beginning. It says on page 2, it's after the first paragraph is finished, it says, as for the actual basic methods, although there are many ways of asserting Mahamudra, there are 2 when dividing according to the sutras and tantras. The latter, the tantric Mahamudra, is a greatly blissful, clear-light mind manifested by such skillful methods as penetrating the vital points of the subtle Vajra body and so forth. Maybe some of you will know what that's referring to, like the Tumo meditation or the Vajra recitation and so forth, bringing the airs into the central channel. The Mahamudra of the traditions of Saraha, this great Mahasiddha, Nargajuna, is also considered, even though we don't ordinarily think of him as a Mahasiddha, also Mahasiddha. Naropa and Maitripa is the quintessence of the Anattara Yoga class of Tantra. That is the highest of the Tantras. Okay, so on page 3, this is the actual sentence I'm looking for, after the first paragraph. And so, for this sutra tradition of Mahamudra, out of the 2 methods that I just referred to you, namely seeking a meditative state on top of having gained a correct view of voidness. Remember what that means? That first understanding it intellectually, getting the correct view, studying Nargajuna's text, Chandrakirti, all of these different things, debating, trying to understand it intellectually. And then on top of that, trying to seek a meditative state on top of having gained a correct view. And the other method, seeking a correct view on top of a meditative state, which is the Mahamudra method here. So first getting that taste, the meditative state within which you cultivate, try to develop a single point of concentration, and then, so to speak, on top of that, using that as a basis, then to understand the meaning of emptiness, to seek a correct view of emptiness on top of that meditative state. Here, I'll explain it in accordance with the latter method. That means in accordance with first, leaving aside all the worries about what emptiness means, first trying to develop a meditative state that has a certain similarity to emptiness, like the clear light nature of the mind. Do you remember from our other teachings, we had a seminar last weekend on the Heart Sutra. Do you remember sort of one of the characteristics of emptiness, the ultimate nature phenomena, is that it is, from Nagarjuna's teachings, from Lama Tsongkhapa's presentation of Nagarjuna's teachings, Chandrakirti and so forth, it is a negative phenomena, emptiness. It's a mere absence of inherent existence. Of course, inherent existence does not exist. But when the mind grasping to inherent existence, believing it, to that mind, not only does it seem to appear, but the mind believes there's something behind that appearance, that there's a real inherent existence there. When you recognize there's no inherent existence whatsoever, that's all that appears to your mind. Just that non-being of the non-existence of inherent existence. No sense powers appear, no objects of the senses, like in the Heart Sutra it says no eye, no ear, no nose, no visual form, no sounds, within emptiness, within the apprehension of emptiness. None of these conventional phenomena appear, only the ultimate phenomena of emptiness. So that has as a basic characteristic sort of spaciousness. To those who describe, that when the Buddha describes the meditative equipoise on emptiness, the two kinds. One, in meditative equipoise, when you have nothing else appearing, is called space-like meditative equipoise. Have you heard that before? I don't know, have you heard? Space-like. So that's the actual meditation on emptiness. It's like space in that space is the absence of obstructing contact. Allows phenomena to exist within it. Like that, emptiness, what we call space-like meditative equipoise on emptiness, or meditation on emptiness, means what is appearing to the mind is a mere vacuity, a mere lack of something. In the case of ordinary space, it means the lack of obstructing contact. In the case of emptiness, it means the lack of inherent existence. Okay? So, the meditative state that we develop through this practical method of Mahamudra has a similarity to emptiness, the clear light nature of the mind. Here we're not dealing with space, we're not necessarily immediately dealing with emptiness, but we're dealing with the clear light nature of the mind, which during our meditation at the beginning, we try to recall or to observe its nature of being unobstructing to other thoughts. Thoughts can enter into it like just emerging from the spaciousness of the mind. And they can then disappear back into the spaciousness of the mind. Example that's sometimes given is like a cloud, rain cloud on a sunny day. Cloud may be quite obvious there, but as the sun rises, gets hot, it can evaporate the moisture of the cloud so that it no longer is condensed and sort of as though it disappears. Where? Where did it go? It's not like it shot somewhere else where you weren't looking. It just, as though it dissolved back into the space. So like that, when we're meditating on the clear light nature of the mind, we're meditating on something which has an aspect similar to emptiness. So that's why this particular method, Mahamudra, is so particularly powerful to lead eventually to realizing the emptiness of the mind. because we're dealing with the mind as the object from the very beginning. And the mind, we're looking at a particular nature of that mind, its conventional nature, conventional clear light nature, which has this unobstructing quality, right? Characteristic. Capito? O capito? How do we say? How does it say? A capito? I can't remember. Didn't learn enough Italian. I remember in Italy, the teacher says, "Do you understand?" And they, "I understand." I guess "o capito" means "I understand," right? Just says yes.
It sounded right to me the first time you said it.
Okay. Capisci? So that's a very special feature. So when Lama talked about Mahamudra being something very pivotal in his own experience, meditative experience, is something that we might be inspired by. This is something, all the teachings that we might have missed on emptiness, maybe we're too lazy to study or to hear or to understand, still there's a chance here, like the great Mahasiddhas, taking our own mind as our object of concentration for weeks, for months, for years, whatever we have left, and using that which has a similitude, a similarity to emptiness, the clear light nature of the mind, similarity to space. They're all different, of course, but they're similar in that they are all negative phenomena, the absence of something. In case of space, akasha, it's the lack of obstructing contact. So, what would you say, Mike? Is where this mug is, I'm going here, I can say, oh yeah, there's space here, but oh, there's no space here where the mug is, because it's obstructing my hand, the contact of that. So there's no space there?
No, there's space there, but the mug's in it.
Yeah, there's a mug in it. It's not like there's no space here, exactly. So even when you're doing meditation on the mind, like we were doing before, just looking at the clarity of the mind, even when a thought is present, if you have that experience and understanding, you can think, yeah, that means there's space there. And instead of focusing on the objective thoughts, you sort of defocus and focus on the spaciousness of the mind within which it's arising. Again, to deprive the thoughts of their longevity, so to speak. It's a really wonderful observation to make, that if you don't pay attention to something, it begins to diminish in the intensity, how frequently it comes to your mind, the intensity of how it comes to your mind. Right now you may be obsessed with something, there's like pizza, Nutella, Jack or Jane, or what was it in kindergarten? Jack and Jill. No, Jack and Jill going up the hill. No, there was some book we used to read in kindergarten or first grade. Dick and Jane. Dick and Jane. You might have been obsessed. Maybe you're obsessed with Dick, or you're obsessed with Jane. But next life, you won't remember them at all. It's not like that remains something indelible in your mind because you don't pay attention to it. One of my teachers told me once when I was feeling down, he said in his broken English in Tibetan, he said, "Don't need unhappy mind. Don't need unhappy mind." It's almost like if you dwell on something which is causing you to be unhappy, that perpetuates the unhappiness. If you recognize you don't need to be unhappy, if you don't focus on that maybe sequence of events, or Dick or Jane, or pizza, Nutella, or whatever, your Ferrari, or whatever you're missing, or whatever you feel you were dissed, or jealousy, or whatever, let the mind relax. You don't have to be unhappy. Don't need unhappy mind. If you recognize it, you don't have to be unhappy. I think that's if you were to say, when people, we don't have probably any expertise in the room of clinical psychologists or psychiatrists, but if you were talking about depression, would you, just like a general worldly talk, you say generally it means the person is unhappy, right? And to some degree, right? Or no? What do you think? You're thinking maybe that's not right.
I think it's like a deeper sense. It's like a more pervasive than just like a I'm unhappy at the moment. Like it's like clinical depression.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. More than just a moment of unhappiness, like you had to pay the toll. You put the money in the toll machine. It didn't work. You had to put it in another time until afterwards. You're like, something like that. But something that perhaps from a Buddhist perspective, the kind of clinical depression that comes without any kind of physiological change or whatever, without any other kind of reasons, is what Buddhism might say is due to karma, especially due to karma, from causing people to be unhappy in the past. Maybe that has an element in all of the various stages of depression. But you don't need to be unhappy. If you don't feed those thoughts, this is a very important observation in doing the Mahamudra meditation, that as the thoughts start coming up into your mind, if you pay attention to them, it's like feeding them, giving them fuel. And if you deprive them of your attention, they will, as though absorb back like the cloud, the rain cloud on a sunny day, they will absorb back into the clarity of your mind. Other thoughts will emerge from the mind at various times because of associations or because of the karma, the time, your digestion for various reasons, the heat in the room or whatever. So this tradition was handed down through the Mahasiddhas, usually in a very intimate way. It wasn't lectured about. It wasn't taught openly because it was seen to be something very powerful that, if not appreciated and practiced, could be discarded by others and lose its ability to help others in the future. There's an expression in the Tantra tradition. It said that why are these teachings? So supposedly the Buddha didn't hide any of his teachings. Have you ever heard that? He said, it's like I've revealed everything. Well, why is it that the Tantras seem like it's supposed to be secret or something? It's only for special people, or if you pay some money for the initiation or something like that. No, because the methods, for the right people, those methods are like medicine. And often medicines, certain medicines are kept, at least in the past, in dark bottles, like there's that sort of brownish bottle, so that even if some light came in, it wouldn't be affected by the light, which can tend to break down the medicine more quickly. So like that, revealing certain things when the people are not ripened, ready, it's like that. It loses its efficacy for others, loses its efficacy for those people if later they were to develop the path and understanding, because they've sort of previously, that's just some, I'm not interested in that, or that's not something that's really helped me in the past. So the Mahamudra teachings were taught, they sometimes call it whispered tradition. Is it like from the mouth of a teacher to the ear of a student, or maybe 1 or 2 or 3 students or something like that. There is one particular teaching on Mahamudra. So there are various teachings. Some of them were written down later, like this Saraha had various teachings that he put into writing. I assume, I'm not sure if it was memorized and others put it into writing or whether he wrote, but there's one in particular that I received the oral transmission of called the Gangama. Have you heard of that? The Gangama? You know the Ganga? Jeff, you know the Ganga?
The Ganges?
In Western language we call it the Ganges. In India it's called the Ganga River, right? The Ganga Ma, I'm using the word the before it, so it's kind of mixing English and other words. Ganga Ma is a teaching given by Tilopa. Tilopa was also a great Mahasiddha. Have you heard of Tilopa? I think Tilopa, if I'm not mistaken, I get these things mixed up because they had many of these Mahasiddhas, if not all, had some profession that they did. They were sometimes very humble people. They were like Saraha, I think, was a fletcher, made arrows. And Tilopa, I think, was crushed till, which I think is sesame, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I have to check the names. So anyway, that was how, to the worldly sense, that's how he made his money. But he didn't have to spend much time doing that. His main practice was spiritual practice. So he was a great Mahasiddha. And when one of the greatest scholars of that time, Naropa, you've heard of Naropa. There was a famous college in Colorado. Trillium Trungpa chose the name of Naropa, right? Naropa Institute. What is Naropa? Isn't that the name of one of our FPMT places? Where is Naropa? No, we don't have a Naropa. So Naropa was
Nalanda.
Nalanda, yeah, Nalanda is there. Naropa was a great scholar, and you know the story of Naropa? How he's connected with Tilopa, how he found his guru. It's great, mainly understanding of these two things, on the basis of seeking a meditative state on top of having gained a correct view. He was, like in the monastic tradition, mainly understanding emptiness and developing bodhicitta, but not yet having put it into full meditative actualization. In kindergarten, we would have said you have to share. You have to have enough to share with everyone. No, just. Remember, if you had candy in kindergarten, you had to pass around to all the kids. So he was on that stage, and at one point he was kind of praising himself, and it was sort of a little bit pride, or maybe there's this prominent factor in his mind, and he'd met one lady who looked quite bizarre. Kind of, maybe it was emanation of the Buddha, a Dakini. And but anyway, he didn't know at the time, and he had said something that she asked, "Did you these teachings that you've given? Do you understand the words that you've spoken?" Of course, I understand the words. And she smiled and laughed and clapped, and then she looked serious again and said, "But did you understand the meaning behind the words?" And he said, "Oh, of course, yeah." And then she started crying and screaming, pulling her hair, and eventually disappeared. Whether poof or whether walked off, I don't know. So this got him thinking, and he thought, what I need to do is, maybe he even heard the name of someone who could lead him into the realization of the meaning of these things, meditative meaning. And it was Tilopa. So he was searching for someone that he felt was Tilopa. Went all over India looking, because Naropa was Indian, was Buddhist, already a great scholar, one of the greatest of the monasteries. Finally, he went someplace and said, "Have you heard of the great guru Tilopa?" And the person said, "Great guru Tilopa? I don't know, but there's a Tilopa down by the river who's a fishmonger, So he said, that must be it. So he went and he found Tilopa, who took the aspect of sometimes biting off the heads of fish and then throwing them into the water, the carcass, which would then be revivified and swim off. Whoa, this is not an ordinary being. So he followed Tilopa, who put him through, what do they call the 12 great activities. Oh, was it in Greek mythology, who was it that had to go through some cleaning out the cow sheds and all of these different things? Do you know Greek mythology? Venerable, do you know? Was it?
Samson?
Who?
Samson?
Samson? I can't remember. My mind is a blank. I know these, sometimes I've known these things, but I've forgotten. Anyway, similar in history, there's sometimes people have to go through these great ordeals. And at one point, Tilopa gave to, I was going to say Naropa, gave to Naropa? Yeah, Naropa. He gave to Naropa a teaching on the Mahamudra on the banks of the Ganga River. It would probably be like 2 sheets. Maybe in English it'd be a little bit longer. And that was called the Gangama. That's relatively famous. There's several Western Western translators who have translated either the text or commentaries on it by Tibetan lamas. I happened to receive the oral transmission of that from a great, young, but previously great Khargyu Lama, Drigun Khargyu Lama, Trisap Rinpoche. And I think at the end of the course I might just read, sort of as though to give oral transmission to you, that I received of that later, and also of this root Khargyu, Gebu Khargyu root text. So this tradition that came through, say, from Naropa, that's one of the streams of the Mahamudra. Other of the Mahasiddhas may have taught their disciples. So there were various presentations of this, held relatively secret. In the Khargyu tradition, that's one of the famed practices they consider to be very sacred, the Mahamudra. They have their own particular, they have had and they still have their own particular flavor of that. Sometimes from the Galupa perspective, Lama Tsongkhapa, other people of the Galupa, would look at the teachings of Mahamudra from some of the Khargyu. So you don't see the word Mahamudra so much in the Nyingma or Sakya, although they do practice that. Main upholders of the Mahamudra was the Khargyu, I think, and especially Lama Tsongkhapa's, having heard the Mahamudra teachings from Manjushri, and direct, not from one of the Mahasiddhas, but from the actual emanation of Buddha, the wisdom, the Buddha of wisdom, Manjushri, passed that on for several generations up until the 4th Panchen Lama, or as some here is called the 1st Panchen Lama, who at that point he felt there was more advantage to making it known, so he wrote down that text, which was up till then sort of kept sacred, secret, whispered lineage sort of thing. That makes sense? So from the Gelugpa tradition, when they look at the Khargyu presentation, at least in the past, of Mahamudra, there's a little bit discomfort, because sometimes the Khargyus would say, when you're looking at this clear light nature of the mind, at the beginning, you are seeing the ultimate nature of the mind. And so like the Galupas would go, hey, this is wrong, it's a conventional nature, it's not an ultimate nature, as we'll see as this is presented. So there's a little bit of, it may be that kind of presentation, calling this clear light nature of the mind, saying to the students that this is the ultimate nature of the mind, may have some deeper meaning, but it may just be a pedagogical device, like to teach. because the emptiness of that mind is the ultimate nature, but just that clear light nature is not the ultimate nature of the mind. It's not emptiness. Do you follow what I'm saying?
I think so.
It's sort of like saying, I don't know, what would it be like saying? Along the, say you're going to make a lemon meringue pie. And once you've got the ingredients there, you haven't baked it yet, you say, there's a lemon meringue pie, but it hasn't been baked yet. So that the person perseveres to bake it. So calling the conventional clear light nature of the mind, the ultimate nature of the mind, maybe to entice the students to continue persevering, because it's something that can be observed and start getting an experience of relatively quickly. There may be other levels of meaning in their presentation, the Kargyu presentation, but we're not, that may have many more profound, why they're calling that the ultimate nature of the mind. But here we're going to be following the Gelugpa presentation that Lama Tsongkhapa that he preserved, that he received from Manjushri orally. So that he also received the oral tradition from the Drigun Kargyu. It said, if you look at Lama Tsongkhapa's biography, he studied with some great Drigun Kargyu lamas, from whom he received the tradition from, Naropa and Saraha and these other Mahasiddhas. That's kind of called the long lineage. Also, even Nagarjuna himself, who had the six great treatises, we call six great treatises on logic. Have you heard of that before? His fundamental wisdom is the main thing, and then that's one that has many, many commentaries, and then he wrote 5 other texts, 6 texts on logic to set out emptiness, to eliminate doubts, and so forth, the 6 great logical texts. Even the method of Nagarjuna, who is considered to be one of the Mahasiddhas, is also called Mahamudra. Okay, because one can realize emptiness that way. So, just in a nutshell, the methodology that Lama Tsongkhapa preserved, that he presented and preserved through the others of the Gelug Kargyu Mahamudra was a little bit like this. One at first does, just as we've begun to do in our meditation, observe the clear light nature of the mind. Once you've started to get a glimpse of that, you try to hold that appearance and that understanding single-pointedly as an object of shamatha. You've heard the word shamatha before, right? You know what shamatha is?
Calm abiding.
Calm abiding, or tranquil abiding. Yeah, there are different ways of translating it. Shamatha. Shamatha is the first fully qualified samadhi that someone might develop. Single-pointed concentration. You could say shamatha is a samadhi, single-pointed concentration, but not all samadhis are shamatha. There's other kinds of samadhis that one can develop later, Like the Buddha, in the Heart Sutra, the Buddha was in a samadhi on the varieties of phenomena called profound illumination or something like that, right? Remember in the Heart Sutra at the beginning, he was just sitting there. He was in a samadhi. That was not just shamatha, there was something more single-pointed, something different. But in order to develop shamatha, you first need an object of observation within your mind. Here we're taking the clear light nature of the mind as your object of shamatha, of concentration. And you have to learn in trying to focus on how the mind can sort of lose its energy. You may have noticed it in our brief time, you sort of, you have it and then you just let go a little bit and it sort of becomes unclear. You might just stay in that uselessly, not developing better concentration. That's one of the faults. You know what that fault is called? When you lose the object because you've let go of it, it becomes more and more dull. What they call mental sinking, one way of calling it, or dullness or something like that. Then there's another reason you lose the object. Let's say this is the object. Jeff? Say this is the object. One way you can lose it is that you sort of like your mind becomes dull and you don't hold it as tightly, and so it doesn't become clear to the mind. The other way is called sinking. The other way is that you get distracted into something else, World Series, fourth game. I might catch a baseball. You start following it. And then this one also can sort of disappear from your mind. You almost, after some period of time, you might have to read it. What do I do? What was I thinking? Oh, emptiness, clear night nature. And then you have to start again. Maybe sometimes you're a little bit distracted by some thought. What is that fault called? Do you know? One fault was called sinking or dullness of the mind, where you lose it because you're not holding it tightly enough and it kind of becomes dark. When you lose it because you've got distracted from something else, and as you're not paying attention to this one disappears. Do you know what that's called?
Overexcited.
Agitation.
Is it?
Agitation.
Could be agitation, what were you thinking?
Oh, it's overexcited.
Overexcited, excitement, in different ways. Agitation or excitement are good. Agitation or excitement is a particular kind of scattering of the mind. Scattering is when your mind goes to some other object. But the main fault of the main kind of scattering, which is a problem, is a particular one called agitation or excitement that's based on attachment. So you're finding something attractive. The other kinds of scattering that's based on, let's say, you remember something you're angry about or you're jealous about or something, they can be eliminated more easily. But excitement or agitation that's based on your mind moving onto another object or thought due to attachment, pleasure in that, finding that interesting, scintillating, Like a kid is fixated with something, the bad food, the food it didn't like, you tried to give it the Gerber peas or something like that, and it's crying, and then you try to distract it, shiny object, here, look at this. They're no longer paying attention to the Gerber peas or whatever. Do you know what I'm saying? So, like some shiny object that you find attractive comes into your mind, that's the other main kind of distraction, a fault of developing single-pointed concentration. Right at the beginning, the main fault is not remembering the object at all, so you have to first develop a mental image of the clear light nature of the mind. And here it's not just having heard about it, it's through your own experience, watching the mind, right? Something very vital, because you're in the mind, you're watching the mind, you're experimenting. If I don't pay attention to the thoughts, they disappear. Even when the thoughts are present, they can dissolve back into the mind, or some of the things can emerge from the mind. The mind has this clear light nature. You're focusing on that through your experience and experimentation in the mind. Then once you've found the object, so to speak, you have these two main faults. You can try to hold that. You may find your mind is excited. You go off to other thoughts. Or if you've gotten, at first, the thing that is more harmful at first is the sinking, gross sinking, the mind just not holding on to it tightly enough. So it becomes less vivid to the mind, not clear, and it's almost like at some period of time you may hear Like you're falling asleep or something like that. That would be an extreme form. That's not, you don't sleep at the beginning, but sinking mind can lead to sleep. Sleep, you know what sleep means in Buddhism? Definition? Venerable, have you studied the mental factors, the 51 mental factors? We should have a refresher course sometime. One of the different...
8:51 p.m.
Thank you, Siri.
What did Siri say?
8:51 p.m.
And that's
Because I
relevant?
think if you touch it with two fingers, you're supposed to say it at the time. Okay, but I was just like pressing it here. What was I saying?
That's the
the
schedule for the
51.
mental factors class.
Oh yeah,
The
oh, yeah.
51.
It's kind of, so there are what do you say? The 5 omnipresent mental factors. Have you heard of that? That are always present in any consciousness. The 5 object ascertaining factors, the 11 virtuous factors, the 20 secondary virtuous factors, the 6 root. What is it? No, the 11 virtuous factors, 6 root delusions, 20 secondary delusions, and then there's another group called the 4 changeable mental factors, one of which is sleep. When we think of sleep, we think it's not like a mental factor, but from a Buddhist point of view, there is a mental factor called sleep. It's a mental factor that causes the senses to be uncontrollably drawn in. So as you're beginning to, and to lead to physical sleep, so when you're beginning to do the meditation, before excitement becomes the prominent problem, because you're drawing your attention in, like I gave the example of the tortoise pulling in its limbs and head. Is that allowed now politically? Is it correct to say it's? I have to say his or her, right? I can say it's, okay, even though it has a gender. I know there's some question about whether you can say their, their good qualities or their beauty or something like that. You have to say, no, that's not a... Okay, it's okay with you. I can say it's. So the tortoise withdrawing its limbs. So already as you're bringing your attention to the heart, away from the senses, there is a tendency to be closer to sleep for you. At first, the dominant fault is sinking. So it's good. So as you're beginning to do this, if you practice tonight or tomorrow and continue to practice, at the beginning you'll notice that you might get some clarity of the mind, but then a short time you're watching it, you sort of lose, the mind loses its hold on it, so to speak. Have you ever been channel surfing 2 or 3 in the morning and you're so close to sleep that you drop the control? Do you know what I mean, Jeff?
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember one of the retreats at Koban. Late at night, it was the last session, we were saying the long mantra of Avalokiteshvara, and Marcel was leading that particular retreat, and he was saying the mantra, but he was saying, and then I told my mother, you shouldn't have to cook, make the breakfast for the guests. He just began to talk. He was supposed to be saying the mantra, so like having lost that because of sinking, maybe. He didn't drop his mala, but sometimes people, if you're saying your mantras late at night, maybe you drop to the rosary, the mala, because you're just not holding it tightly enough. So that's a good example of the mind not holding the object. When you don't hold it tightly enough, to revivify that image, again, you have to apply a little bit of what's called squeezing. It doesn't mean squeezing of the body like, like this, but you have to learn how to squeeze the mind. So pay attention to that. Remind yourself that you recognize that sinking is beginning to hold, and see if by squeezing, paying more attention to that, you can revivify that and try to create a continuity of your concentration of that object. After that, once you get once the gross sinking is a little bit taken care of, then excitement becomes the next obstacle, where even subtle excitement, even a little part of your mind is multitasking, thinking of something else. You're not investing all your mental energy into the object. So you have to learn how to do that. So we'll talk about that subsequently. So as I said, in a nutshell, we first try to recognize this clear light nature of the mind, which you don't recognize it perfectly at first, identify it perfectly at first. You get a general idea, and then that is enhanced as you're concentrating on it more and more. But first you see that, then you try to develop shamatha on the basis of that, going through the 9 stages to develop fully qualified shamatha. You may not have to develop perfect single-pointed concentration on that clear light nature of the mind, but now you can keep a continuity of concentration on that for some time. Then you leave that. You've got a clear, you can look at your own mind, very clear laboratory, so to speak, to do your work. And within that mind, you try to identify the subtle object to be negated in personal selflessness, the appearance of an I or self. Right now, with our ordinary distracted mind, we can kind of understand the procedure how to identify that. Like you can say, the I is not the I that's appearing to your mind is not the body, is not the mind. It's some sense of the self. It's not identifying yourself as an architect or as a government worker or as a businesswoman or anything like that. It's just a sense of I, self, and my, things that I possess. I and mine. And one way to try to instigate that in concentration is by remembering you being falsely accused of something, like someone said, "You lied." Your response is, it's not that you're identifying my body lied or that my mind lied. It's a sense of I. They're saying that I lied as though there's something else other than the body and mind. It's that one that you try to identify. But here, because of the clarity of the mind, all the other conceptualizing thoughts that hinder you from recognizing the subtle I, because it's very, very subtle. It's always there, but it only sticks its head is up a little bit, but it only sticks its head up clearly when you've been, your baby left you, or remember what the example that I said, the quintessential lyric of all blues music, my baby done left me, some despair of having lost something, or falsely accused, or you're a liar, someone says you're a liar, and it's not as your body lied or your mind lied, it's just that they're claiming I lied. There's that sense of I that becomes more prominent. Here, that I can be seen more clearly because you've meditated for a long period of time on the clear light nature of the mind. Once you've identified that I through this Mahamudra method, you apply the logical reasonings of Nagarjuna and the other great beings to prove its non-existence, because you identify how it's appearing as being inherently existent from its own side, not just a name. Mike is not, if I say Mike is just a name, Mike, you say, oh, Mike, I'm Mike. It's like there's something within me that's Mike, not just a name that's given to your body and mind, that's identified that particular set of aggregates as Mike. Once you've identified that, how it seems to be existing, then to apply logical reasons to refute that. And as a result of that, to experience for the first time the real taste of emptiness, the emptiness of the self. Selflessness of persons. So in the Mahamudra method, that may be somewhere in your long retreat, meditating on Mahamudra, Then, with that armor, you go back to the mind, the clear light nature of the mind that's appearing. And remember in the Heart Sutra, what was that special thing also that Avalokiteshvara said to Shariputra? He said that the bodhisattvas who wish to train in any son or daughter who wishes to train in the profound perfection, practice of the perfection of wisdom should practice like this, repeatedly and continually seeing those five aggregates also as empty of inherent existence. So not just seeing the I as empty of inherent existence, here the particular aggregate, particular phenomenon that we're looking at to see as empty is the clear light nature of the mind. The mind itself, this conventional clear light nature, is appearing so clearly, subtle, non-obstructing, knowing. Then to apply the logic that you've applied to the self of persons, to the mind itself, to realize the emptiness of the mind within this mind itself. Very, very quiet, perfect laboratory to do this in. His Holiness the Dalai Lama has said, I mentioned in one of the other talks, once you have developed an understanding, an insight into the emptiness of the mind itself, further spiritual progress is very rapid, can be very rapid. Because the mind is the subject from which experiences all of our phenomena, all of our experiences, knows all of our experiences. If that mind, if that subject is not inherently existent, you can understand logically, although you may not see right at the beginning, that all of its objects are likewise empty of inherent existence, just by experiencing that and using the right logic. So that's kind of, like I say, that's in a nutshell the strategy. Recognizing the clear light nature of the mind, using it as an object to develop tranquil abiding, and persevering in that for some time. You don't necessarily have to have full-fledged single-pointed concentration yet, but then recognizing the object of negation of personal selflessness, the self, the I, how it appears to be inherently existing within that clear light experience, very undistracted, no other conceptualizing thoughts coming up. Applying logic to refute that I, realizing emptiness, selflessness of person. And then, which would be a valid realization of emptiness, conceptual realization of emptiness of the person. And then to go back to the mind itself, the clear light nature of the mind, and say, wow, this thing also appears to be existing there by itself. Like when we do the death evolution in Tantra, do any of you practice imagining the dissolution of the elements at the time of death? And generating yourself as a deity? Jeff, do you do that?
I have done that.
Like when you do retreat or something. So at a certain point you can actually meditate. You meditate on the emptiness of phenomena, the emptiness of the self, then the emptiness of the mind itself that's perceiving these things. In that death evolution, there are ways of doing that. So that's a general strategy to lead to this realization of the emptiness of the mind. Then one is a prime candidate to practice the tantric Mahamudra, where you, through the practices of Tantra, you develop, an understanding that the ordinary appearances of this lifetime are, you overcome your attraction to those, what's called, overcoming ordinary appearances. You need to develop a sense of yourself as being more validly this deity that you are imagining because you will eventually become enlightened. Divine appearance and divine pride, generation stage, and then practicing the completion stage to bring the heirs within the central channel, at which time you're no longer imagining the subtlemost clear light nature of the mind. Up till now, we're imagining now the clear light nature of our gross mind right now, but hopefully through the process of concentrating on it, refining that, you're actually getting closer and closer to actually perceiving that clear light nature of the mind. We say the gross mind. In Tantra, in the end, in the completion stage, you are trying to bring about a manifestation, a revealing of the subtlemost clear light nature of the mind, the clear light nature of the subtlemost mind, which doesn't manifest itself to us now, to a certain point of view. Everything is like during the day, you don't see the stars, right? Can you see the stars during the day, Venerable, at 12 noon?
Sometimes.
What times?
Certain stars.
Certain stars, maybe Sirius or some very bright star. I remember when I was teaching at a boys' school in Connecticut, one of these snotty boys' schools. There was a little observatory, and I got to I sort of said, I'm in charge of that. And I read a lot about astronomy, which I hadn't studied in college. It was all astrophysics, not talking about just the constellations and everything. And I read a book that said that in ancient times in Mesopotamia, Babylonia, these countries, high plains, clear skies, no pollution, that on a moonless night, the star Sirius would actually cast a shadow. I thought it'd be a great name for a novel. In the Shadow of Sirius, or something like that. Do you know what Sirius is? Do you know the star Sirius? It's the brightest star of the, in our sky, other than you could say the sun. Sun is a star, but the brightest star in the sky. So, right now, during the day, you might see Sirius, but generally, when's the time you could see all the stars during the day? An eclipse of the sun. Have you ever experienced that? The moon in its path, much, way away from the sun, but it covers the sun, and at that point, there's no light from the sun reflecting off the atmosphere, and you can actually see the stars that were, and once the moon moves away and the sun is there again, you don't see the stars. A little bit like that, our subtlemost mind, because it's obscured by all of these strong things right now, you can't see the subtlemost mind. It's there, but we don't observe it. So in the Tantra Mahamudra, you try to develop that, actualize so that it's awakened and clear, that subtle, clear light nature of the mind, and then realize its emptiness. It's called the meeting of the father and son. Have you heard that expression? Or no, is it mother and son? Mother and son. The sun empty. The sun clear light means sun, meaning S-O-N, not S-U-N. Mother and son. The sun meeting the mother again. The mother clear light is just the appearance of that subtlemost mind. The sun clear light is a realization that, wow, that appearance is actually the meaning of emptiness. Once you can join those two, you can achieve enlightenment in one lifetime. The meeting, if your son and mommy clear light can meet, you can achieve enlightenment very, very quickly. Not just, 3 countless great eons, maybe one lifetime. Maybe that night. Okay, enough. So this is just a little introduction to the Mahamudra, which you have the pleasure of having heard, and those people who were watching the 3rd game of the World Series didn't come tonight. I hope there'll be some more people tomorrow. Didn't hear. So let's just relax for a moment and try to dedicate the merits that we created this evening in developing the motivation at the beginning, virtuous motivation, having heard the teachings, thought about them, maybe been inspired, maybe developed some virtuous thoughts. I can do this. I will do this. Why not? I've created some virtuous karma which will ripen on me in cyclic existence as something pleasurable, but rather than it being unattended and left to ripen in such a way, maybe for instance, sometimes if you're born in the future life with an attractive body because of creating virtue in a previous life, practicing morality for instance, you might develop pride, and it might actually become a detriment to your spiritual practice. But if you dedicate that merit, that in whatever way it ripens, may it always become the cause of my continued spiritual development, this lifetime, future lifetimes, up to and including enlightenment. If I'm wealthy, rather than it becoming a cause of my avarice and, as the wealthy sometimes can be, may I have an inherent nature of generosity to use that for the benefit of others. Whatever merits I've created tonight, may they become the cause of my continued spiritual development from life to life, so that I can quickly achieve enlightenment for the welfare of others. Meaning, from that state, I can effortlessly and spontaneously lead sentient beings out of confusion, the various paths that the Buddha knows to lead people even out of the hell realms or animal realms slowly to perfect enlightenment. Due to these merits I've created tonight, try to make that pact with yourself. And if you remember the meaning of emptiness, to seal that dedication and the emptiness of the three spheres, the merits I've created tonight, I can think about them, they have a mental image, but they don't exist the way that they appear. They're empty of inherent existence, which allows them to function. The goals dedicated to my various realizations along the path, up into including enlightenment to spontaneously benefit sentient beings, that too I can think about, but doesn't exist the way that I think is inherently existent. That too is empty. And the act of dedication I've just done, wishing strongly that these merits would lead to those results, that can't be found anywhere. That too is empty of inherent existence, the dedication. In so doing, making the merits and their dedication, depending on your understanding of emptiness, impervious to anger and other factors that could cause those merits to be degenerated or lost in the future. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for your attention. Those of you who have the energy, hope to see you tomorrow. And if you see anyone on the street, tell them they're welcome.
So I'm confused. This teaching is based on the Gangama?
No, I just mentioned that because there were many transmissions of Mahamudra. This teaching
That's a different presentation.
That's a presentation from the Mahasiddha to Lopa to Niropa.
Right. So that's not based.
This is not based
on that.
It's not based, although it may, I'm not sure, I don't think this quotes, or in the commentary, he may quote in the commentary, the Panchen Lama also wrote a commentary to this root text. He may quote something from the Gangama in that, but it's just another one, a very popular and maybe very vibrant one, because we've all heard of Naropa, I mean, not everyone's heard of Naropa, but many of us have heard about Naropa and Chalopa, and you know, you could just imagine that on the banks of the Ganga River, you know, Chalopa, wide-eyed, giving this presentation of how to realize the emptiness of the mind itself, Mahamudra, its meditative method to Naropa. So that's kind of inspiring somehow. This is based on the short lineage, mainly the Galupa, although Lama Tsongkhapa also heard, as I said, he also heard the distant lineages from Tilopa, Naropa, from Saraha, Maitripa, and other great Mahasiddhas. But this is the short lineage, meaning he heard directly from Buddha of Wisdom, Manjushri himself. And that's kind of this, Manjushri said, this is the way you should do it. So there's many other kinds of flavors of talking about it in the Kargyu and other traditions. Okay,